Woo, what a morning. Y'all didn't expect that, did you? You don't know what to expect from me, do you? Well, it's my honor to introduce our speaker. I didn't get a lot of chance to write any new material from this morning, so I'll probably say about the same thing, if I can think of anything good to say about him. I could tell you all about his football career, but he likes to tell us that himself, so we'll let him. Could tell you about his wife, Faith, his high school sweetheart that he married, and his family, but he likes to tell us about that too. I could tell you about his walk with Christ, but he really likes to tell us about that. So we'll let him address all those things. I met Dave a few years ago and his wife, Faith, and even through the seriousness and silliness and anything else I can think of, the word lovable. I hope y'all fall in love with Dave Rowe just the way we have. Jesus told us in John 13 to love one another. That's how we will know we're one of Christ's disciples. Well, I know Dave Rowe is one of Christ's disciples because he loves everybody. So let's give a real warm welcome to our friend, Dave Rowe.
Gosh, that was nice, Tim. Not like usual. Yeah, I know. Gosh, thank you. It's fun being here. It's fun seeing these graduates. It's fun for me to come back here. I spoke at Trinity High School at a graduation, and I was just trying to think of how long ago it was. I remember Carter Sink was the teacher. Do you remember Carter Sink? What a great guy. Wasn't he a great one? And the Hildreth fellow, what was his name? Faith will remember. Where's Faith? Paul Hildreth. Yeah, Marilyn Hildreth. Boy, they were great people. I'll never forget they asked me to come up there, and I said, well, you can't afford me. And they said, well, we're going to try. I said, don't even try. But what a fun. It was good driving up here and remembering this. You know, as I was talking to the young people this morning, I thought about my times back in high school and how high school touched my life in a very, very special way. I've actually lived a dream life. I know that sounds, people go, oh yeah, he's lived a dream life. But I wrote down some of the things, and you know what, I was trying to be humble, and that's hard when you've had so many. It's tough when you got all these things, golly. But I married my high school sweetheart. Boy, that was fun. 9th grade we started dating. I was telling the kids this morning that I didn't know you could trade them in, so I just kept her. But we'll be 48 years in June, and man, she's the rock of my life, and thank you all. What? August. What did I say? June? June's my birthday. That's why I've got that on my brain, hon. I'm sorry. Because you didn't get me a present last year, and I was really hurt. But I went to college on a full scholarship, and believe it or not, it was the only way I could have possibly gone to college. I could not have gone to college. My parents had no funds, and they farmed us out with our grandparents 2 or 3 times when my parents were really having hard times, and they struggled. So I went to Penn State on a full athletic scholarship, and it was marvelous. The only way I could have gone to college. I graduated from college. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college before, so you can imagine. Today, everybody goes to college. I was drafted by the New Orleans Saints. And you know, you all watched probably on TV, you saw this draft, you know, where they put the jersey on the guy and put the hat on the guy and he walked up. Well, I was picked in the 2nd round. And it was really interesting when I got drafted. I think we were out at Burger King, and my mother-in-law called Burger King and said, hey, Dave, I got to tell you something. Some team called you. I said, oh, really? I said, who was it? She said, I don't know, but I wrote down the number, but it doesn't sound familiar. And I'm like, this is big time. I'm going to walk up in front of the camera. No, I called up and I said, who are you? We're in New Orleans Saints. And I went, oh, thank you. It's great. And went on to play 13 years in the NFL. Just had a marvelous time. Played with the Oakland Raiders and I was showing the young people my Super Bowl ring, but your pastor said don't pass it around in this church. So, and I got to tell you, your pastor did not spend Sundays in church. I'm not trying to drop the dime on you, but he said, I remember the 77 Oakland Raiders, Minnesota Vikings, 32-14, Willie Brown. I'm going, yeah. And I remember you and Kenny Stabler, and I'm like, holy cow, you didn't spend Sundays in church. Man. But you can imagine playing for one of the greatest teams ever, the Super Bowl Oakland Raiders. I wear a Super Bowl ring. I got out of football, and football was my love. Well, don't you know I go 30 years in broadcasting NFL and college games, which was a primary part of my living. So, I kept me involved in a life. I just can't imagine that life could be any better. And I have truly lived a dream life. I even got a postcard from the President of the United States. And he asked me if I could come up to the White House for lunch. Now that's a thrill, man. And I looked at that thing, and it was really fancy. So I called back, that number at the bottom, about 15 digits, beep, boop, beep, 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 boop, 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 beep. White House, yo, hey, how you doing up there? This ain't the one on the corner. Said, hold for the President. Okay, go get him. But, that's thrill. Those are thrilling moments, and that means a lot to me. But you know what's funny is a lot of you are high school graduates. I know, Ben, everybody was surprised that you made it. But, that's why they gave you a gift. Holy cow, they've been holding it for 3 years. No, but I know Ben from back in Chrysalis days and Walk to Emmaus. But as I was watching the young people come forward, I thought back on my high school days. Now, as a football player, you're always asked, what's the greatest moment that you ever had in your life? And you can imagine a Super Bowl would be one of those things, or I played in the Pro Bowl and I was picked All-Pro, or a great hit, or whatever it might be. And it's really interesting because the two people that affected my life the most were my two high school coaches. Now, I will tell you that Brad Phillips, you in that light blue, Brad Phillips was in my youth group and grew up, so he's a reflection of my wife, not me, but what a great kid he is. Well, he's a principal now at Trinity High School. But I thought back on what affected me most in my life, the people that touched my life the most, and I have been under great football coaches, John Madden, Joe Paterno, just great football coaches and people that you would think would have influence on your life. The greatest two people in my life that touched my life the most were my two high school coaches. One was my track coach. His name's Jim Hawkins. He's a black fellow, and I love him just like he's my dad. And it bothers me to talk about him because I went back a couple years ago, I went back and his wife said, I drove up there. Boy, I'm going to cry, Tim. I hope not. But anyway, I drove up there to his driveway, and she said, Dave, he won't recognize you. And I said, well, let me go in and talk, Coach. Now, this is a man who gave me values and touched my life. He was more like a dad than my own dad. And I walked in there and I talked with him for about 20 minutes thinking I would light one of those light bulbs up. But he lives in a dark world of dementia. And boy, that's a cruel, cruel thing. Boy, as I talked to Coach, all the good times that we shared and all the things that he shared with me, wow. And the other guy was my football coach, Roy Pickens, a little short guy. He's taller than you, Minister. I'm only kidding. Yeah, I bet you were fast when you played. You better have been fast. I used to take guys your size and make wishes with them. Just grab his leg and make a wish. Only hurts for a minute, Pastor. But the other one, and I'm glad I get to chuckle a little bit, the other one was Roy Pickens. He was my high school football coach. Those men lived a life in high school that was so different than everybody else. And I kept on searching, what is it that they have? What is it that makes them tick? Well, they were both two very, very strong Christian men. And they taught Christian values. I'll never forget, now picture this, I'm playing football, and we played with these old leather shoes, high tops, and those old metal cleats. Golly, and you old football players will laugh at this. You remember when somebody used to step on your foot? Oh, man, did that hurt. Well, I inadvertently just dropped it. Somebody stepped on my foot, tore the shoe, and I went, damn. Coach Pickens, son, come over here. Come over here, son. I walked over. I said, yes, sir, Coach. He said, you don't use language like that on my football field. Take a lap. Well, this lap was about a mile out around this cornfield. And, I came running by, and I'm going, he goes, take another one. Oh, man. I ran around that, and he said, don't ever use language like that on my football field. This is my football field, not your football field. This is my football field. Well, I went back when I was a sophomore in college, and I always wanted to be. I only went to college because Coach Hawkins and Coach Pickens told me to go. But I went back, and as a sophomore, and I was sitting there in the gymnasium, Coach Hawkins and Coach Pickens sitting with me, and we're talking about fun times. And I will never forget what they shared. They looked up, and there was a little sign over top of our locker room door. It said, Deptford High are champs, B1. Well, I played 4 sports in high school. I had college scholarships in 3 of the 4 sports. I mean, I had over 100 scholarships to go to college, go just basically almost anywhere I wanted, because I was as big as I am now in high school. So there I am sitting there, and he says, you see that sign? You know what that means? I said, yes, sir, that's being the best. He said, well, that's important, but you see that word champs? I said, yeah. He said, every letter in that word stands for a quality that determines success, whether it's in athletics or life. You want to be successful? Follow those. And I looked up there dumbfounded. Coach Pickens turned around and said, the first letter in champs is C. To be successful, and I can tell you young people this, to be successful, you need that quality because that's courage. You have to take courage to stand up for something. If you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. I told my children, I said, somewhere where you least expect it, you're going to be out in the car driving with all your friends. Hey, man, we're having a great time. Driving along there, and all of a sudden somebody's going to pass around a bottle in that car. And it goes to this person, this person, this person. Or it could be a marijuana cigarette. This person, this person, this person, and now you. And if you don't have the courage to stand up for something, you will fall for that, as many people do. Because I don't want to look like a chicken or a coward or whatever they call them. So it takes courage to be successful, both on the athletic field and in the game of life. You're going to need courage. H is heart. Heart means that you have to love what you do. Man, I love football. I played football for 20 years and broadcast for 30 years. I loved football. I didn't quit because I didn't love it. I quit because I got too old and couldn't play anymore. If you want to be successful in life or you want to be successful in athletics, got to have H. That's heart. You got to love what you do. Whatever your occupation, and we listened to, as your pastor read out the different occupations that you're seeking, just make sure that you love it, like I loved football. A is attitude. On any one day, one team will beat another team because they have the right attitude. Happens in sports all the time. I'll never forget when Phi Slamma Jamma came up and played NC State in the national championship. And I want to tell you something. On that night, with the right attitude, they beat Phi Slamma Jamma. Phi Slamma Jamma was Houston. Their first 7 guys could dunk the ball. I mean, man, they were a team. But on that night, with the right attitude, NC State knocked them off for the national championship. Happens all the time in sports, and it happens in life too. You want to be successful? Have the right attitude. I can remember sitting in work, and we had this one lady who came into work, and she'd come in that back door, and we'd scatter like quail. Just, we'd all get out. Because she'd come in that door at about 5 minutes of 8. Oh, what a day. And we're like, oh, man, it's all downhill from here. So your attitude is so important. They taught me the letter M is your mind. Got to have an education. You're all seeking education regardless of where that is, and that'll take you far in life. One of the great football players I ever saw only lasted 3 years because he just didn't have the mental capacity to play football. So if you want to be successful, exercise that mind. P is pride, and pride's what swells up. It's what just bowls up inside of you. When we used to play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you remember that, Pastor, golly, the 70s were rough years. Played them 5 times and lost 4 of them. They went to the Super Bowl 4 times, and we went once. Thank goodness we won that one. The Immaculate Deception, you remember that, Pastor? Yeah. They call it the Immaculate Reception, but it was deception. But anyway, you have to have pride, and pride will take you forward. Again, stand up for something. And the greatest of all qualities in that word that he shared with me that day in Champs is the last letter, S, sacrifice. I look back there and I see a young lady I know who sacrificed. And I've heard your story, and I know you all have sacrificed. I've got a granddaughter that's graduating from Southeast Guilford this year, and she sacrificed. And that's so important, whether to be successful, whether it's in life or whether it's in the game of athletics. So I took those qualities, courage, heart, attitude, mind, pride, and sacrifice, and that's what governs my life. And I've had a marvelous life. I'm in the fourth quarter of my life, unfortunately. But I've had a marvelous life. I've been blessed time and time again. Now, that would have been enough if those two high school coaches had only shared that. But you know what else they shared? They sat there. Now I'm a sophomore in college. And Coach Pickens looks at me and says, "Do you know who the greatest athlete that ever lived was?" I said, Jim Thorpe. He said, No, he's not even close. I said, "Who?" He said, had Jesus Christ played sports, he'd have been the greatest athlete to ever live. He's the only perfect person that ever walked this face of the earth. And they shared with me their faith and what made them tick. And I never forget, as I find people who accept Christ, I love to hear their story of how they accepted Christ. I'll never forget Mike McCoy. He was the second player drafted, Big Mikey, out of Notre Dame. Second player drafted behind Terry Bradshaw. And I went up to him and I said, "Mike, we're good friends. I said, how'd you find God? How'd you find your faith?" And he said, "Carroll Dale." I said, "Carroll Dale?" He said, "Yeah, Carroll Dale." He said, "When I was with the Packers, Carroll Dale played on that team, and he had something that was special, and I didn't know what it was." He said, "Even Coach Lombardi wouldn't yell at him." He said, "He just treated him nice." He said, "He had something, and I didn't know what it was." So he said, I walked up to him. He said, "I'll tell you the truth." I walked up to him. I said, "What is it that you have that makes you different?" And he shared with me, he said, "I know Jesus Christ is my personal Lord and Savior." He said, "That's what makes me different. I walk to a different drummer." And that's what I was challenging you this morning. When you get in those dark moments, and there are moments when everything's piling up on you, and you've got exams or you've got requirements or whatever it is, just take a nice deep breath and just say, "Whew, I sure am glad you're here with me, Lord," because he will be there. I've experienced some incredible times, and I could tell you just over and over about those times and how much they mean to me. Those two high school coaches, man, they meant everything to me. And it saddens me to see Coach Hawkins like that and to know that he doesn't have long on this earth, but I will see him again, and we'll share all those stories because I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories. I told the young people, again, you're asked, what's the greatest moment you ever had in your life? My greatest moment is probably one of the most interesting moments ever. I'd come home from John Hanna's pro football camp, and I'll never forget, my little son, Mark, who was 3 at the time, ran out, grabbed me around the leg, and said, "Daddy, you're home." And I said, "Yeah, son." He said, "Let's go play ball." I said, "Well, first of all, go across the street and get that motorcycle out of Mr. and Mrs. Roberts' driveway over there because they'll be coming home." So he toddles across the street. He's 3 years old. And he grabs the motorcycle and he starts back. He gets about halfway in the street and he stops. And there's a car coming down the street, and the lady's looking at me. She saw me right there. She didn't see him. He was right in the middle of the road, and she hit him and picked him up and threw him about 30 feet over into this drainage ditch. And it peeled everything back from just behind his right eye, tore off his ear and everything back. I picked up this kid, and I yelled so loud, I guess Faith heard me because she came out and put him up against her, and he didn't make a sound. And when I drove through Asheboro at 100 miles an hour trying to get to that hospital, because I knew if I got to that hospital that my son would live. I don't know why I thought that, but I drove 100 miles an hour through Asheboro. I got there, I cleared a 4-foot wall on a dead run with this kid in my hands. And I got in there, and Marion Griffin, a great Christian buddy of mine, turns around and said, "Step out." He said, "This isn't going to be pleasant." He said, "We've got to stabilize him." So they got down there and they started working on him, and I'm standing out there on the back deck of that hospital, and I will never forget, and I told you, you can call on God anytime. Man, you talk about the most feeble prayer you've ever heard in your life. And I just turned around and I stood out on that back deck and I said, "Lord, where are you? How could you let this happen? Man." And my son's in there. And I mean, it's breaking my heart. And the funny thing is, I got my Super Bowl ring a month earlier. And if I had had this ring in my hand and you tell me, throw that in the trash and I'll make your son better, I'd have done it in a heartbeat. It means nothing to me in relationship to what my children do. And I stood out there and my minister was there in a minute, and he said, we need to commit this to the Lord. Well, I look like I'm a timid person maybe, but I'm 6'7", 300. And I grabbed my minister in the front of that shirt, and he's a short fella, and I lifted him up so he could look at me. And I said, what if God takes my son? And he turned around, we got to pray about it. So we prayed about it, and I walked back in there, and people always ask you, what's the greatest moment? What's your best tackle? What's your best? I remember walking back in that room, and my son was laying out there with those wires all over him, and I put my 2 fingers, Mary, and said, see if you can get a response. We can't get him to respond. And I got down by his good ear, and I said, Mark, I said, this is Daddy. I said, and I put my 2 fingers in his hand, had wires and the whole head wrapped up. And I said, Mark, this is Daddy. I said, son, squeeze my hand. I'll never let go of you. And he wrapped those fingers around my hand. Whoa, you talk about pumped. Man, was I pumped. I mean, I said, Mary, and he squeezed my hand. He said, let's make sure we have a valid response. And I got down there and I said, Mark, this is Daddy again. I said, son, squeeze my hand and hold on. I'll never let go of you. And he wrapped those fingers around. I lifted his hand up, and it was like a breath of fresh air when God gave me back my son. And it taught me a marvelous lesson, because God loved us enough that he sent his only son. His only son. Now, I'll tell you right now, this is a gospel truth. I wouldn't give up my son for you or for you or for you. I wouldn't give up my son for you. I wouldn't give up my son for you. But God loved us enough to give his only son. I have 3 children. God teaches me marvelous lessons. And you all see Mark now, he's 6'4". He was 400, if you can believe it. That's big. I'm 300. He's big. He's about 6'4", he was 400. He's now 230. In fact, right now he's running in the Raleigh Ironman over in Raleigh, marathon. So he's a great kid, and we have been blessed. My wife and I have been blessed so much. I don't know where God's going to take me in this 4th quarter of my life, but man, has he been there for the first 3 quarters, and I am so thankful. That's why I challenged you young people. I said, take God with you wherever you go. Don't be ashamed of him. Don't put him back in the closet. Don't hide him when you go out and do something. Take him with you in everything you do, and he will never leave you alone. He'll always be there. It's just like, as I said this morning, it's like those footprints in the sand. When I needed him most, Lord, where were you? I was carrying you. And that's what God's done for me. I thank you. God bless you, graduates. I wish you all well. I know that I know you've had to put up with Tim for a lot of years. But he's my old buddy. And when he asked me to come down to speak here, I couldn't turn him down. I know that. But God bless you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing what God laid upon your heart. This time, our final song, it almost feels the way I was drawn by that message today, to a closer walk with Jesus Christ. We're going to sing about that, just a closer walk with thee, as it is each Sunday. The altar's open if you want to come and kneel and pray about anything going on in your life, any way that God has spoken to you this morning. We invite you to come. So let's all stand. Let's sing together, just a closer walk with thee.